I was 13 when it happened. The kind of age where you're too old for night lights but not old enough to stop getting scared when the house creaks at night. It was Kayla's birthday, a sleepover, just the two of us. We'd been best friends since 3rd grade. Her parents let her have free reign of the downstairs for the night while they stayed upstairs, probably grateful to avoid the chaos of a tween-girl sleepover. It was all pretty typical: horror movies, too much candy, prank calls we chickened out of halfway through. Around 2 a.m., we were starting to crash. The last movie we watched was some old VHS slasher Kayla found in her dad's collection. It wasn't even that scary, really, more cheesy than anything. But something about it had us jumpy. We double-checked the doors and windows like we were prepping for an actual killer to burst in. We dragged our sleeping bags into the living room, right in front of the couch. The lights were off, except for the dim yellow glow from the kitchen nightlight. The ceiling fan above us spun slowly, and I watched it make lazy circles while Kayla's breathing grew heavy and even beside me. She was out cold within minutes. I wasn't so lucky. I just lay there, staring up at the fan, listening to the night. There was this kind of peaceful silence that only settles in a house deep into the night. I remember thinking how still everything felt. And then, I heard it. A creak. Not from the stairs. Not from above. From beneath me. My body stiffened. It wasn't loud, but it was distinct. The floorboard directly beneath my sleeping bag groaned like something heavy had shifted underneath it. Not like settling wood. More like pressure. Wait. I held my breath. Then came the sound that still makes my skin crawl to remember. A soft, deliberate scraping. Not metal. Not a rodent. It sounded like fingernails, or maybe even claws, dragging lightly across wood. Slow and steady. I whispered, "Kayla." Nothing. I turned my head and tried again, a little louder. "Kayla." She shifted but didn't wake. That's when I heard it. A breath. Not mine. Not Kayla's. From below me. Like someone was lying on their back just underneath the floor, exhaling up through the floorboard. A warm, moist breath. Close enough to touch. I bolted upright. Heart racing, mouth dry, I grabbed my sleeping bag and backed away, fast. I bumped into the hallway wall and stayed there, eyes fixed on the spot where I'd been lying. Finally, Kayla stirred, rubbing her eyes. "What's wrong?" she mumbled. I told her. Every word. I sounded insane, even to myself. But I couldn't shake it. Something was down there. At first, she laughed, chalking it up to the movie and too much sugar. But something in my face must have gotten to her. Because after a pause, she sighed, grabbed the flashlight from the kitchen drawer, and followed me back into the living room. We peeled back the area rug between the couch and the TV. That's when we saw it. A vent. Not like a standard floor vent. This one was old, rusty, heavy. It didn't match the other vents in the house. And it was right under where I'd been lying. Kayla looked confused. That's weird. I don't remember this. We got it open together. It creaked loudly, the hinges brittle and corroded. And inside, nothing. Just black. Not ductwork. No air system. Just a dark, empty crawlspace. I leaned over and shined the flashlight in. It dropped maybe 4 feet down. Dirt floor. Wooden beams. Old spiderwebs. No movement. But it felt wrong. The air coming from it was warm, too warm, and it smelled like something old. Damp. Like a basement that hadn't been opened in years. We didn't talk much after that. Just shut the vent, put the rug back, and decided to sleep upstairs in Kayla's room for the rest of the night. Neither of us got much sleep. The next morning, we told her parents. Her dad furrowed his brow when we mentioned the crawlspace. That part of the house was sealed years ago, he said. There shouldn't be a vent there. He came downstairs with us, curious. When we showed him, his face shifted. He crouched down, examined it like he was seeing it for the first time. I completely forgot this existed, he muttered. I thought we sealed this during the renovation. Kayla asked why it was there in the first place. Old access crawlspace, he said. For plumbing or insulation. It should have been covered permanently. But it wasn't. I noticed he looked uneasy too, though he tried not to show it. Later that day, he screwed the vent shut and said he'd have someone come look at it, just to be safe. That was the end of the conversation. But not the end of the story. A few weeks later, I was at school when Kayla texted me during lunch. Guess what? She wrote. They opened the crawlspace. She said the contractor they hired to inspect it found something strange. Scratch marks. Dozens of them. On the inside of the wood frame, just beneath the vent. Like someone had tried to claw their way out. And the weirder part? A tattered piece of fabric was caught on a nail inside the space. It looked like old clothing. Child-sized. They never figured out how the vent came loose again. Kayla's family eventually sealed it for good. They even laid hardwood flooring over that part of the living room. We never talked about it after that. But every now and then, when I wake up in the middle of the night, I think back to that sound. That breath. And I wonder, what if it hadn't been asleep when I was lying there? What if it had been waiting? This happened in 1999, back when I was 15. I was sleeping over at my cousin Brianna's house in Ohio. It was one of those classic teenage girl nights. Junk food, pop music, gossip, and barely controlled chaos. She had invited a few of her friends from school, and there were 5 of us total. All girls, all loud, all restless. And all obsessed with Ouija boards. We were knee-deep in our paranormal phase. You know the one, black nail polish, burning incense we bought at the mall, and claiming we saw spirits just to scare each other. We'd stay up late reading scary stories to tell in the dark, daring each other to play Bloody Mary, and pretending to hear voices in the static of the old tube TV in Brianna's basement. Looking back, I know how stupid it sounds. But at 15, it felt real. Dangerous. Exciting. Like we were poking the universe just to see if it would poke back. That night, we waited until midnight, because that was when the veil is thinnest, or whatever nonsense we'd read online. We turned off the lights, lit a circle of cheap birthday candles around us, and placed the Ouija board in the center of the room. It was one of those old school boards from Parker Brothers, with the alphabet in a neat arc and yes, no, and goodbye printed in the corners. We sat in a circle, each of us placing 2 fingers on the planchette. It was quiet for a moment. Then we giggled. Then it got awkward. At first, nothing happened. A couple of the girls, Jessica and Maddie, I think, tried pushing the planchette on their own, spelling out BOO, or run, and giggling like it was the height of comedy. We rolled our eyes. We'd all done that trick before. But then, it started moving again. And this time, nobody was laughing. The planchette slid slowly across the board, smooth and steady. Not jerky like someone was nudging it, but like something else was guiding it. Something calm. Purposeful. The room, which had been warm from our body heat and the candles, suddenly felt cold. Not just chilly, cold. I could see the hair on my arms stand up, and I remember thinking, it's like someone opened a freezer. The planchette spelled HLLO. We looked at each other, eyes wide. No one admitted to moving it. No one dared. Brianna whispered, "Who are you?" Slowly, the planchette glided to the letters again. Amara. None of us knew Amara. Not a classmate, not a neighbor, not a distant cousin. We sat in silence for a second, absorbing the name. Jessica asked, "What do you want?" The planchette paused. Then, "Why oh you?" We all jumped back like the board had bitten us. Someone knocked over a candle, and wax spilled onto the carpet. The shadows on the walls danced wildly. I felt something crawl up my spine, like icy fingers brushing each vertebra one by one. Then, without warning, the power cut out. The overhead light popped with a crack, the TV fizzled to black, and every candle went out at once. We screamed. Someone tripped over a sleeping bag, and another girl fell into the side table. It was pure chaos, screams, shuffling, bumping into each other in the dark. Then, as fast as it went dark, the lights came back on. And that's when we saw her. There, standing in the corner of the room, right next to the bookshelf, was a girl. She looked about our age. Maybe younger. Her skin was pale, almost gray, and she had long, stringy black hair that hung damply around her face. She was barefoot and wearing an old-fashioned nightgown, white, but dirty at the hem, like she'd walked through mud. She didn't say a word. We stared, frozen. At first, we thought maybe it was someone's little sister playing a prank. But no one in the house had siblings that young. And there was something wrong about her. Her eyes were vacant. Her lips were slightly parted, like she wanted to speak but couldn't. And her body, she didn't sway or shift or even blink. She just stood there. Watching. After what felt like a year, she turned around without a sound and walked out into the hallway. We hesitated. Every instinct said not to follow. But we were too shaken, too curious, too stupid. We got up, whispering frantic questions to each other, and followed her out of the room. But she was gone. The hallway was empty. We checked every door. The bathroom. The laundry room. Even the hall closet. Nothing. The back door was locked from the inside, chain still bolted. No open windows. No way out. She had vanished. When we went back to the living room, the Ouija board was still on the floor. The planchette had moved. One word was spelled out. "I'm still here." After that, we didn't sleep. Not a wink. We all stayed huddled together in Brianna's room, the board shoved under a pile of laundry like that could somehow contain whatever we'd summoned. No one wanted to admit how scared we were. But I could hear the tremble in everyone's voice when we spoke. I could feel the tension, like the air itself had teeth. Brianna's mom was furious the next morning when she saw the wax on the carpet and found out the power outage had flipped the circuit breaker. We told her we'd been watching movies and someone accidentally knocked over a lamp. She didn't buy it, but she didn't press. We never told her about Mara. We all drifted apart after that year. Different schools, different lives. But every so often, one of us would check in with the others. And weird things kept happening. Jessica said she saw the girl again, once, in the reflection of her bathroom mirror. She blinked, and she was gone. Maddie's dog wouldn't go near her bedroom for weeks. It would just sit outside the door and whine, ears back, tail between its legs. Brianna started sleepwalking. Her mom found her standing barefoot in the backyard one night, whispering something no one could understand. And me? I still dream about her. Not often, but when I do, it's always the same. I'm back in that room, 15 years old, candles flickering. The planchette moves under my fingers. I look up, and she's there. In the corner. Barefoot. Watching. Always watching. A few years ago, I got curious, or maybe reckless, and tried to look her up. I searched old local obituaries and records from the area. And I found something. In 1967, a girl named Mara Green went missing. She was 11 years old. Last seen at her home, wearing a white nightgown. Her parents claimed she vanished in the middle of the night. No sign of forced entry. No fingerprints. Just, gone. Her case was never solved. I don't know if it's the same Mara. I don't know if we somehow reached across time, or if the board connected us to something darker, something that only pretended to be her. But I do know this. We invited something in. And whatever it was, it never left. I threw away my Ouija board years ago. I don't mess with that stuff anymore. But sometimes, when I'm alone and the house is quiet, I swear I hear a soft creak from the hallway. Like bare feet on wood. And every so often, just before I fall asleep, I see her in my mind. Standing in the corner. Silent. Still here. I was 11 the first time I spent the night at my best friend Drew's house. His family had just moved into a big old house out in the woods outside of Dayton, Ohio. No neighbors in sight, just a gravel driveway, miles of trees, and the constant, humming drone of cicadas that filled the air like a warning. The place felt isolated. Like the world stopped at the edge of those trees. I didn't think much of it at the time. I was just excited for video games, junk food, and sleeping in bunk beds like it was some kind of indoor camping trip. Drew's room was upstairs, at the end of a long hallway. His parents didn't come up much. He said they were always tired from fixing up the house. The room was nothing special, posters on the wall, a box fan in the window, and those creaky wooden bunk beds that felt like they'd been built decades earlier. I got the bottom bunk. Drew climbed into the top, and we stayed up talking about dumb stuff, school, monsters, girls we liked, until we both passed out. At least, he did. Sometime around 3 a.m., I woke up needing to pee. You know that weird half-asleep state where the room feels unfamiliar, like you're waking up in a dream and reality hasn't quite settled in? That's how it felt. Everything was still, heavy with that deep nighttime silence. I sat up and rubbed my eyes, adjusting to the darkness. The fan was still humming in the window, barely cutting the summer heat. Drew snored softly above me. As I swung my legs off the bed, I looked toward the closet. It was open. Just a crack. I remembered it being shut when we went to sleep. I was sure of it. Something about the way that door hung slightly crooked, the hinges squeaking when it moved. I would have noticed if it had been left ajar. But that wasn't what made my stomach turn. It was the eye. One single, bloodshot eye staring back at me through the narrow crack in the door. Not wide-eyed in fear. Not startled. Just watching. Unblinking. Patient. Like it had been there for a long, long time. My body locked up. I couldn't move, couldn't even blink. My mouth was dry, but even if I'd wanted to scream, nothing would have come out. My muscles went slack, and the only thing I could think to do was back up, slowly, silently, until I was pressed against the wall, half on the bed, half off. Then I pulled the blanket over my head like it was armor. Like that thin sheet of fabric could somehow keep it out. My heartbeat thundered in my ears. I couldn't breathe too loud, couldn't move too much. I thought if I even twitched, the eye would reappear. Or worse, the door would creak open the rest of the way. Minutes passed. Maybe more. Time didn't feel real. I don't know how long I stayed like that, barely breathing, completely paralyzed by fear. Eventually, exhaustion won out. Or maybe my brain just shut down to protect me. I must have drifted into sleep at some point, because when I opened my eyes again, soft gray light was leaking through the window. I sat up cautiously and looked toward the closet. The door was shut. Not cracked. Not slightly open. Shut. Completely. I felt that same cold pit in my stomach rise again. I didn't want to say anything to Drew. I didn't want to sound like a baby. But curiosity got the better of me. When he finally woke up and sat up in his bunk, I asked, "Hey, did you leave your closet open last night?" He froze. His expression shifted, he went pale, just for a second, and I saw the hair on his arm stand up. He looked down at me and said, quietly, "You saw him too?" That's when I knew it hadn't been a dream. Drew climbed down from the top bunk and sat on the floor across from me. He didn't speak for a minute. Just stared at the closet like he was waiting for it to open again. Then he told me something I'll never forget. He said the man had been in the house since the day they moved in. At first, he thought it was just nightmares. He'd see shadows in the mirror or hear whispers at night. His parents said it was normal. New house, new room, maybe too many scary movies. But then the man started appearing more often. "Sometimes I see him in the mirror behind me," Drew said. "Or I hear him breathing behind the closet door. Last week, I saw his hand, just the fingers, sticking out from the bottom of the door. Like he was reaching. I remember feeling like I was going to be sick." I asked if he ever told his parents. He nodded. "They think I'm making it up. Or dreaming." My mom even saged the room once, but he didn't leave. He doesn't care. That day, I told my mom everything. Every detail. She didn't laugh. She didn't say I was imagining things. She just got really quiet and said I wouldn't be spending the night there again. And I never did. But that didn't stop the nightmares. For years after that night, I'd wake up suddenly in the middle of the night, heart pounding, sure that someone was watching me. Sometimes I'd dream about that bloodshot eye, just the eye, floating in the dark, staring through the crack of a door that wouldn't close. Other times, I'd dream I was back in that room. Drew's room. Only I was the one in the top bunk now, and the closet door was swinging open slowly, inch by inch, with something tall and pale stepping out, its face hidden, but its hands impossibly long. I asked my mom years later if she ever believed me. She hesitated, then said something that still gives me chills. "When I was your age," she said, "I saw a man in the closet once too. But I kept quiet. I think some places, they hold things. Things that remember us. I don't know what it was in that closet. I don't know what it wanted. But I do know this, Drew's family moved out of that house 2 years later. He never told me why. Just said they left suddenly. That they didn't even sell it, just locked it up and left it to rot. The house is still there, I think. I looked it up once on Google Maps. It's hard to tell through the trees, but you can just barely make out the roofline, peeking through the overgrowth. The driveway is cracked and covered in weeds. No one's lived there in over a decade. But I still remember the feeling of that night. That frozen fear. That sense that something was waiting just behind the wood. Waiting for me to move. Waiting for me to open the door. I never did. And I never will. Because that eye, it wasn't just looking at me. It knew me. These stories aren't just campfire tales. They're not urban legends or ghost stories whispered at sleepovers. They're memories. Real moments when laughter turned into panic, when comfort twisted into cold, suffocating fear. Sleepovers are supposed to be fun. But for some of us, they're where nightmares begin. Subscribe to Midnight Whispers for more true horror stories, told in chilling detail. And remember, don't open the closet door.